Greetings everybody, my name is DJ. Today you're going to be learning about my new model of manifestation called reality synthesis. What is reality synthesis about? Very simple. It's about being yourself without compromise. That's what this whole thing is about. Becoming an immortal being, ultimately, is really the function of what all of this manifestation stuff is leading you through, right? They don't tell you that. Popular manifestation culture is not connected to immortality, but that's really the point. To become individuated as yourself. To become fully integrated within all of your capacitive components that you have access to. And that's really what all of this imaginal work is about. It is about building the subconscious mind. Because you don't have one. You don't have a subconscious mind. Well, most people don't, at least. I know I have one, but most people who can't manifest effectively don't have one. The reason why most people can't attain consistent results, primarily, is because they are unable to attain a connection to their subconscious capacity. In other words, the waters that their lens of perception is viewing is all murky, right? The subconscious capacity is automatically expanded through dissolving not self stuff, right? You have a fixed role to play in life. And by the way, Neville Goddard taught this. He did actually mention that, for example, if you're born into the world as a rich person, and that's the role that you play in one life. Another one, he says you will be basically playing the role of a shoe shiner. That's what he said, not me. I'm just a messenger, right? This is what he taught. He taught that you have a fixed trajectory and that all of the experiences that you have are necessary to integrate the components that allow you to become an individuated representation of all of the simulated, or simulacrum components of God, because you're a simulacrum, meaning that you contain all of the elements. Creation is done means that you contain all of the elements of creation that are on the outside. So, on a micro-internal level, you contain everything that exists on the outside. In capacity. This doesn't mean that you are all of that right here, right now, right? That doesn't mean that you can just go into any state at any time and be anyone at any point, whatever. All of this relativistic, solipsistic, mind magic, mentalism trash. The reality is that you have capacity to realize all of those things. Creation is already done because all of the components already exist to be integrated, right? That's the point. And everybody's been interpreting this wrong the whole time. All the popular coaches out there, all of them. I shout out all of them. Unless you can figure out how actual alchemy and metaphysics works, you're ill-qualified to talk on the subject of manifestation. Ill-qualified. I don't care who you are, I don't care how popular someone is, if they don't understand the actual fundamental elements that make up what manifestation is on a mechanical level, and the correct theoretical side of things when it comes to the, you could say, the mystical doctrines of this stuff, then they're missing the point. That's the reality of things. It doesn't care about what we believe. Even though Neville Goddard did say all of the techniques are simply to get you to believe, that's still a half-truth, right? Neville Goddard didn't teach you the deep levels of alchemy. He didn't. He just didn't. He left things out to play mind games with you. Do you understand? He never told you to cultivate subconscious capacity or subtle state cultivation. He never told you about this. Even though he mentioned some of his practices that he did back in his days with Abdullah, representing what this would have done. For example, imagining himself, looking behind himself and flashing around, imagining himself in different places. What he was doing there was training his subconscious capacity, right? On one level at least. That's not the whole thing, but that's part of it. What he was doing was he was expanding his connection to the earth element, which is the exalted water element, which is a clear, unconscious mind. The waters are clear and stable and calm. And so when you are in that place, you can slip between the veils, right? Your conscious mind can slip between the veils and you can embody a different part of your being. Because you have 3 different bodies. And these other bodies are all literally interacting with their own reality and their own lives just like this one. So when you listen to what Goddard said about you'll wake up in a world just like this one, what he was talking about is not physical reincarnation. That is incorrect. You are not immortal. You are not immortal. If you die, you will dissipate into your components, and you will basically be scattered into the wind, and your parts will be recycled. People don't like that idea, but that's an alchemical fact. Souls are not permanent. Souls are not spirit is permanent, but soul is not, because soul is a combination of spirit and body together, or salt, and mercury, right? If you don't have these components operating proportionately as one thing, they dissipate and dissolve into nothingness, basically. So Neville Goddard, when he said that all you'll do is just recycle, what he's talking about is from the perspective of the source of emanation, of your specific source of emanation, down into this projected experience. Not you in this current iteration. You're not an immortal being unless you complete this work I'm going to talk about now. But when he said you'll wake up in a world just like this one with the promise, it's not that you, as in your current identification, lives on. You die. Oh, it's heresy. It doesn't exist. No. When you die, it means that the sulfur has been basically disconnected from its primary interstitial parts. And the other bodies, you then take upon yourself the interaction of those other subtle forms until then they dissipate over time and decay into their components and they get recycled. So this is what I said in the beginning. It's about immortality. All of this is leading to higher cultivation of subconscious capacity to stabilize those other bodies on more subtle levels that Neville Goddard was actually talking about, right? He was talking about experiencing the lunar body and to a certain extent also the solar body, because you have three bodies, right? As I said before, you have the physical being as you are now, and you have the lunar body, and then you have the solar body. You have three, not one, but three. The mercury, the salt, and the sulfur, right? All of these three bodies have their own individuated experience. And when you are doing imaginal work, right, you are taking the current conscious experience in this body and slipping it into a different body. And you are becoming aware of the different bodies. And they are becoming aware of each other. And by making them aware of each other, they can become one thing. And then you become immortal. That is what all of this is about. Do you understand? You have to take the three components and make them into one thing, or primarily the solar and lunar body. Understand that in order to complete this work that Neville Goddard was talking about with the promise, we have to follow our fixed trajectory first and foremost, meaning you have a fixed role to play, and the manifestation should work inside that container. Meaning that if you're trying to bypass the role that you're designed to play because you have attachments to being someone else, that's not going to work for you. You're going to be buying into all of this not self-conditioning, thinking that if you just grasp at this thing and imagine hard enough, you'll make it happen. That's the exact opposite of what should be applied. That's not going to work. You need to be building coherency with where it is that your intuitive impulse, meaning your inner truth, however you feel it, the inner truth needs to be cultivated and made clear and acted on with trust, right? People have taken what I've said in the past to the extreme and said, oh, all of my desires are all correct. Incorrect. I've talked about the not self before, purifying the self and the not self. You have distinctions between these two parts of you, right? If you are already complete in yourself on every level, which you have the capacity for, as I said, but you're not realizing that in the moment, that's what I said, you have to build the subconscious mind. If you were clear on every level, you would already have a fully functioning subconscious capacity. In other words, you'd be able to slip in and out of that degree on a whim, like Neville Goddard did. He did that work to attain that level of ability, right? But he didn't tell you to do that. And this is the problem that Goddard's work has, because it's not complete. It's incomplete. He doesn't tell you how to make imagination work effectively. He doesn't tell you that. He never told you about how to make that work reliably for you. He didn't, we can only guess, but we can assume that he did that because he didn't want you to know those things for some reason or another. Otherwise, he would have told you about his experiences and why they were necessary to go through. But no, to him it was all about belief. Oh, and by the way, we also must understand that Neville Goddard also taught that manifestation will not stop suffering. He actually quoted this. He said in one of his lectures that manifestation will not prevent us from suffering, but it will cushion the blows of life. Okay? This is exactly what he said. If manifestation was you can be anyone, have anything, he would not have said that. So you explain to me, these people who think that you can just state shop for any reality imaginable, right, that works the way they say, how come he said that? And then right after that quote, in fact, on the same lecture, in the same paragraph you could say, one of these are the written ones, by the way, the written ones have the best. He said in the lecture, right after, there is no limit to the creative capacity. And yet right before then, he said that it's not going to stop all of your suffering, that it's going to cushion the blows of life. That's exactly what he said. And he said this under the context of suffering. And he said that we basically have suffering come through us because that's what God requires us to go through. Really. Otherwise he wouldn't have said that if suffering be your lot, then suffer knowing the glory that comes at the end. If it was about needless suffering, he would have said to exit the state. In fact, he actually called someone who wanted to manifest back an X into her life. He actually called this person incredibly stupid. I know he said stupid. It was either incredibly stupid or stupidly something. I don't know, but he called her stupid. Like, do you see what I'm saying? There are quotes that God had said that contradict what the standard LOA doctrine is about. Why? Why would he say that? If it was so clear cut, why would he say these things? So again, he's either contradicting himself or there's more to it than what most people are willing to let on. So I'm going to expose the truth about what Neville Goddard really taught and basically expose all of the fairy tales that are being told out there about how you can be anyone, have anything instantaneously, and that you don't need to go through this. This is all just limiting belief, or it's just extra work, or this and all that, all this nonsense, complete nonsense. We're here to sift through and distill all of the nonsense and get to the core, the real root, the foundation. This is what the foundation is really about, right? Most people don't know that. His experience over a period of time, these mystical experiences came through him as a process of him being himself doing his stuff. Obviously, he was on his path, otherwise he wouldn't have had these things unfold for him. So, you know, that's fine for him and his path, but when it comes to seeing him as the authority of knowing all things about manifestation, that's not the case. Again, he already had some things wrong, or at least half correct. So we need to understand the distinction between how these things interact and how you can make manifestation work for you reliably, right? There's a reason why most people who do an imaginal work, an imaginal act, don't get the outcome. Number one, they don't have the integrated component available to them to mediate. So as I said, you're a simulacrum of all of the components on a macro collective level within you, right? You have all of those components already existent within you that you can then target and mediate, because it's not your power. You're mediating current through the open and clear channels. When you make correct decisions, what it's doing, those decisions are there to help you manifest. You don't see that in the current moment. You don't say, oh, I feel uncomfortable doing this thing. But your role is there to open up and clear those channels in the first place. So as I said, there is a foundation you need to build when it comes to working with whatever it is that you're designed to do in this world that is necessary to open up these channels, to then mediate the current, to be able to perform conscious and deliberate seeming manifestation. Not that you'd even really want to anyway at a certain level, because you wouldn't need to. But my point is that if you want to mediate power and manifest things and actually have the psychological level of this stuff work for you, then you have to open up the channels. You have to cultivate subconscious capacity, because that is the mechanism that this actually works through. It doesn't work any other way, right? There is overlapping components that come together in different orientations to mediate each other in thematic supply-demand. You're going to move them, they're going to move you, because you both provide each other what you need, right? That's how this whole thing works. You're going to basically rearrange your components on a thematic level, and that will then give them something to basically draw upon, because you're mediating the current through yourself, because you're open and clear, and you have the capacity to make that work. You have power, literally. Not your power, but you're open to receive and channel power, right? Because as I said, you're being played by God. You just don't have conscious awareness of all of the other bodies that I was talking about. You don't have awareness of them. They're doing their own thing on the more subtle levels, but you're not able to slip into that because you don't have the capacity and the clarity to be able to actually observe that in your consciousness. You don't have the bandwidth. You don't have the clarity of the waters. The waters are all murky and they're all bubbly and boiling. You can't see anything, right? So subconscious capacity is about making the waters clear enough, right? Clear enough to be able to interact and interface with the subtle elements. So subtle state cultivation and stabilization is what we are doing. That is what we are doing with this work. We are not living in a mentalistic, relativistic, solipsistic reality where we can be anyone and have anything at any time. We're not doing state shopping. You know, I remember hearing this talk from some guy who was doing a critical analysis of LOA, and he was talking about modern manifestation ideas as like this, you know, idea, concept, state shopping idea where you're just like, I'm going to pick a state and it's a complete joke. At some level you can technically get to that point if you've integrated those components and can mediate those powers. Yes, you can. But if you feel uncomfortable with that thing, there's a reason why. It's because you're not clear and you're holding onto attachments of not self that you feel within you are not correct for your orientation. And so that inner truth is there for a reason. It's there to reveal to you something that you can't comprehend on a conscious level. It's there to give you the inner guidance to make decisions that will actually allow you to embody and take upon yourself the necessary components to reach a satisfying outcome in life. If you trust it and follow those intuitive impulses when they come up, you know what I'm talking about. Those spontaneous moments that show up over the course of your life, opportunities to make decisions that actually you know are going to value your vitality, value your sense of self, but you don't make them because you're uncomfortable. Those opportunities are opportunities to purify not self and to actually open up to more power, mediate more current, and thus manifest efficiently who you are. Because if you go through those experiences, the experience itself provides to you the understanding of that current. So as I said, God drives you from above, you're clear and open, and you can receive that message clearly and make decisions through that without resistance. That's what we're doing with all of this work. And that's why people, when you hear them say, oh, I just made this, I felt compelled to make this decision. Neville Goddard himself said, I think it was every subconscious impression or every impression or something like that ends in the volition to act. Ends in the volition to act, that's what he said. And so you'll hear stories of people saying, oh, looking back, and this is usually when they look back, and this is my point of what I said before about you don't know what you're doing now is serving something in the future that will lead you to manifest what you actually want, but you don't see it now, right? So they'll tell you, oh, I just felt this compulsion to act in a different way. All they did was integrate and understand a component of consciousness that was necessary for them to have a naturalness of making that decision. That's all that happened. That's all that the imaginal experience on an internal level rearranged the components so that they were comfortable and coherent with each other, so that the decision was then able to naturally be made automatically anyway, right? You don't have to do that to manifest the experience though. It's not necessary. You can do it in other ways as well. As long as the components internally are oriented correctly, you will manifest anything really that you have natural striving for, because that's what it is that you're actually being moved through by God, because you're being driven by that. Neville Goddard himself said in the Four Mighty Ones and in Seed Time and Harvest that the first element, the air element, it's the sudden inspiration to, it was basically, you're receiving a wish. That's basically what he said. You're receiving the desire, the wish, the direction that you're looking to move in, which is basically an orientation of these various currents mixing together to, create that lens of that filter of perception, which is that direction of experience, right? And out of that, he was then talking about how that leads into being an outcome which leads to you forming an experience in your mind, automatically, which you do all the time, to represent that thematic current into a manifest level experience. He says that you are fed these ideas like wishes, right? The wish fulfilled, the state of the wish fulfilled. What is the wish? The wish is natural striving that God is moving through you. It's coming through you. You're not deciding it. It's already there and you're receiving a signal. Are you clear to receive the signal or not? That is the question. That is what all of this rests on. If you are clear to receive the signal, the translation into the experience will be automatic. So then he says the next element, which he says is psychological truth. Literally, that's what he defines water as, which comes after air, which I'm going to argue is not necessarily correct, but either way. He says that then you build out the imaginal scene which represents that thing, right? That's what he said. Now what this really means is that are you unconsciously clear enough to allow that to come through you in a clear way without the distortions of the not self trying to shift it around into being something that it's not really designed to be for you. So as I said, the fixed role comes through you as the wish. Are you clear enough on the waters, the unconscious level? If you are, you will automatically translate that into the experience and the thoughts will come through you automatically, which is what happens if you're comfortable with the thing. It comes through you, and naturally you drop it, you allow it to be there, and it unfolds. Do you understand that it's not controlling? It's not about control, it's about integration of thematic components in a manner that allows you to psychologically manifest comfort for the thing, that allows you to drop it and unfold it. Right? Now there are other ways that you can do this as well. You can follow natural striving and go all the way through purifying resistance, even if you don't feel like you can receive it, because that's just you transforming the resistance that's coming through you from the correct orientation anyway. So making decisions under pressure that you know are necessary to be made is doing the same thing as allowing it to come through you and be purified, because when you're going through natural striving, going through all the way, breaking boxes, limitations, things that you don't feel you're capable of, going through, but you know are necessary to do so, that is clearing the unconscious mind, clearing the water element, the psychological truth level, to allow that to come through automatically in a clear way. So as I said, this is all about clarity. Clarity, that I mentioned, clarity of channels is proportionality, right? Clarity of the channels is proportionality. You want to be creating channels that are clear, because each of these channels has a corresponding thematic level to it, that if that channel is blocked up with all this trash that you feel like you need to be holding on to, anytime that you receive nourishing current that comes up against it, you're going to try and run away from, it's uncomfortable, I don't want to feel that. If you run away from feeling it, you're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to get anywhere. You have to allow yourself to experience it fully. And that's what going all the way is about. Going all the way is about allowing these channels to be clear. Make that clear. So, fixed role to play, you have self versus not self. Right? And then we are a simulacrum of, all things in reality, because we correspond to all of those levels, because we have the channels that represent those things that we can allow current to come through us, media into experience. What we're doing by building the subconscious mind is clearing the not self stuff, because that opens up capacity for what is correct for us to come through us in a clear manner that allows us to automatically be ourselves. Like you're dissolving the distance and the contrast barriers that keep you from automatically allowing yourself to make those compelled decisions that you find successful manifestations coming through. Right? Actually study enough case studies and you'll find this to be a common thread. Very common thread, in fact. And Goddard himself mentioned that. Why? Because it's important. So, when we put all this together, it's very simple. If you want to manifest something like money or whatever the heck, right? 9 times out of 10, that's going to come through you automatically by going onto your correct path anyway. Your correct trajectory will give you enough money to fulfill your function, your purpose. Now, interestingly enough, some people are actually supposed to have a journey where they don't come across the absolute truth, because that's not for them to have in this experience currently. Some people are supposed to go deeper into understanding the nature of manifestation than others. So all of the disinformation out there exists for a reason, because if it didn't exist that way, I would not be able to do what I'm doing today. Do you see how this works? Thematic supply demand, right? Different orientations of thematic currents translating into psychological experiences that we believe in, right? Because if it is and it's clear and that channel is open, the belief will automatically come. So getting you to believe is a letting go process of not self to clear the waters, to allow subconscious capacity to expand, to mediate current, to manifest things. Do we see now how this works? It's not psychological. There are underlying structures that are invisible that you have within you that you don't have awareness of, that are all living in their own reality, doing their own thing on the subtle level, of course, that you can interact with. And the reason why I mentioned the other bodies, even at all in this video, is because Neville Goddard, in his later lectures especially, when he talked about experiencing these different characters of the Bible and whatnot, he was actually experiencing the different components of his consciousness, right? On the subtle level that the subconscious capacity can open up. So when you do enough of the work, this goes back to the very beginning of the video, when you do enough of this work of following your correct orientation, the correct trajectory that you have fixed, the role you're designed to play, and whether or not that be in this iteration or another one doesn't really matter, but the point is when you do enough of that work and you clear enough of the not self stuff and you open up enough of the subconscious capacity to be able to interface with those subtle levels, you will then receive visions, receive insights, downloads, gnosis, gnosis, sudden understanding on an intuitive understanding level. You just know something, even if you don't know how or why, but you know something, you feel something is correct, right? The feeling is the intuitive sense of truth. That is all that it is. I made a video on this, right? You can go watch that video. The feeling is not about hand sensation feeling. It's not. It never was. It is about psychological truth in terms of the intuitive sense of knowing something is, correct for you, true. You have proof of it in some way, shape, or form. It's correct. This is my truth. Whatever the truth is the feeling. I have a feeling about this thing, right? You hear people say, I've got a feeling about that. They feel something is going to happen, right? Whether or not it happens or not, doesn't matter, but that's the point of the analogy. It's not about emotions, because emotions are temporary. They come and go. They're there to tell you where, energy is being basically run up against or not. And feeling sense, because these are the interpretations you can have. Feeling sense is just, this is one of your imaginal senses. Obviously, feeling sense is not the secret. No duh. That can be part of it, but that's not the whole point. So the feeling is the secret. The real secret is intuitive sense, because the intuitive sense is the language of the subconscious mind. That is really what we're actually dealing with when it comes to impressing the subconscious mind. It's impressing an understanding of something through experiencing the reality of what it is that we're designed to go through, to allow it to move through us, to receive that intuitive impulse, to go through that experience, and we receive what's necessary from that experience. And that automatically allows us to believe what it is that we need to be believing to unfold the manifestation that we're desiring, right? Do we understand? It's the process. People think it's like a switch, boom, I've just flicked my mind. Again, if you have those components integrated and you're comfortable with it already, you will just want to make the decision and you'll just do it. That's the natural orientation that manifestation works through. It's just, you're receiving current that orients your psychological level onto, I'm going to make a decision in this way, because remember, it comes through you, the air element, the four mighty ones, the air element, it comes through you, you receive intuitive impulse, you receive the wish, I want to do this thing, right? You have clarity of the channels, water element, psychological truth, okay, I believe I can do this thing, let's go and do it. And then you unfold it over time. Or if it's not involved in you physically doing something, it will be involved in other people coming to you. Or vice versa, whatever the heck the arrangement is, right? It doesn't always involve you going out and doing stuff. Sometimes it can be actually doing nothing and accepting that that's correct for you. Because you might believe that you need to be doing things that you don't need to be, right? That's the point. How does successful manifestation look? Well, that's how it looks. People who apply techniques and get results, they already have the integration of those components available to them. Which is why you'll find people who are comfortable with certain things are able to manifest them so much easier. I have proven this in my own life, and you can see this in other people's lives. It's plain as day. Like, this is the thing. Most people who don't manifest what they want, they just simply can't face the pressure. They can't go all the way. Because as I said in my last video, when you imagine something that you desire to unfold, and that requires you to clear channels with not self stuff that's blocking the channel, that's allowing it to mediate through you and actually manifest the people to you automatically, unconsciously. The reason why is because you're unwilling to go through the pressure to dissolve the not self stuff in the channel that's blocking the current from coming through you. And also manifesting it in a psychological manner that's natural as well, because they correspond directly to each other. There's a lot here in this video to understand, but I hope it's making sense. This is what manifestation is really about. It's not about psychological stuff in a vacuum. Psychological stuff is a result of these invisible mechanics that really ancient alchemy has decoded with what I have discussed. So I'm telling you the hidden underlying mechanics of what drives the phenomena of manifestation. Most people in this community only want to hear things that supports their view, because that's what they know, that's what they're comfortable with, right? But that's not what leads you towards immortality. That's not the point of the work. You are not here to manifest things in your life. You are here to complete the great work. And the great work is to become immortal, effectively, right? Where you take all of the bodies that I just discussed that have their own existences, you make them aware of each other, and they become one thing. That's what Goddard taught in the end, didn't he? The promise, so-called promise. It was all about immortality. It was about completing the work of integrating what's necessary for you to complete what it is you're being moved through. So God drives you. You receive intuitive impulse. I have a decision to make in this way, right? Whether it be an acceptance on a virtual and imaginal level, or a decision to make in the physical, they both correspond anyway. When you can accept and go through where that represents, and unfold and integrate those components, you have integrated another piece of reality. You have realized more of your capacity, and therefore you can create, co-create more effectively, right? Manifestation, the way that we're being told. So all of these people who come to my channel and tell me that, oh, I'm overcomplicating manifestation. No, it's being oversimplified. It's the other way around. If it was as simple as they say, then everybody who watches those videos and applies what they say would have results, but they don't. Obviously, which is why this industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, because it's not something that you can just go and watch a video and apply something and have everything automatically come out. That doesn't work like that. Obviously, like, do you understand? There's a process here that exists that's been known for literally thousands of years, that has been lost, forgotten, and buried, and transformed into this psychological model that we're being taught today. So, how do we actually cultivate subconscious capacity, you could say the more effective way, in your own time and space? Well, the way that you do it is like this: gazing, imagining, and praising. Gazing, imagining, and praising. Now, what do I say with this? Number one, gazing will open up subconscious capacity the most, because you're taking the conscious mind, as in your observation, into the unconscious mind, meaning everything that is circulating in your psychological, the water level, right? You're allowing the conscious mind to feel spontaneously, usually, necessary components that need to be surfaced because you've got current moving through the channels when you do gazing. You're basically allowing when you do gazing, it's like you're initiating a self-cleaning operation, right? You're initiating a self-cleaning operation where, when you're overlapping these components of the conscious and the unconscious mind and creating the subconscious space to explore, the channels to be cleared whenever current runs up against them. And it will happen spontaneously, right? You can't control this when it happens. People, like, when you go watch my gazing video, which I made a video on the gazing. In fact, I'm the only person anywhere in this community, as far as I know, who actually discussed the Neville Goddard gazing method, because he actually did teach gazing, just not to the degree that I do, because he didn't talk about the deeper levels of, impact that this technique can have. Because gazing has many, an infinitely more potent amount of components that it interacts with than what Goddard was discussing. But either way, when you're doing gazing, what you're really doing is you're overlapping the conscious and the unconscious mind. You're creating space within the subconscious capacity, temporarily usually, but that's there and opening up, that represents nourishing current spontaneously running through resistive channels that need to be cleared, and it will come to the surface and you will feel that stuff. And as you allow yourself to sit there and continue to gaze, you are allowing that nourishing current that is driving, from top down coming through you. It will clear out the not self stuff, because you're opening up to the level where that stuff is held, right? So the deeper you go into gazing, the more you're going to interact with the level, the degree of subtlety. This all correlates, and you might find some connections if you're already listening and paying attention. You're going to interact with the degree of subtlety. And when you sit with that, it automatically, from top down, will purge out not self stuff just like magic, so long as you can sit through and allow that to happen. You don't have to target it, because it's a self-organizing intelligence. It is a self-organizing intelligence that you are interacting with, because it comes through you. You're not going to target specific stuff. You can do that, and that can have benefit, and that using self-organizing intelligence will make what's necessarily unconscious to become conscious without you needing to dig for it, right? That's why working with this principle, the self-organizing intelligence, by allowing yourself to shift into degrees of subtlety, that automatically, that level itself has awareness. That is effectively the subconscious capacity level itself, and that intelligence that literally lives as that level. Like, think about it like this. The level itself, the state itself, has intelligence that you are going to interact with that cleans you out when you do these practices. That's how I will say this makes work. Efficiently and easily done without needing to target stuff. You are opening yourself up to intelligence that knows what needs to be cleaned for you by just sitting with it. So my gazing method and my subliminal that's on the website, the phase coherency booster, that will also take you into the same degree of subtlety that will allow the self-purification to happen, right? So the subliminal times gazing, if you do them both together, that can result in a very, very potent way of touching into a deep state where you're going to be interacting with those subtle levels of consciousness that's going to allow you to clear the channels and allow all of that current to be purifying your not self stuff. It will drive you through experiences and it will burn stuff out automatically. So allow that to do its job and you'll be making progress. Do you understand now why gazing is so powerful? People seem to do this a couple times and they're like, oh, it's not manifested, I'm going to go back to overstimulating my mind and feeding myself with things that I don't need. That's why you're still stuck, because you're not actually allowing yourself to feel through what's necessary and giving yourself space. We are way overstimulated in the modern world. Way overstimulated. It's not even close, right? If you live spending hours every day consuming content just to feel better about yourself, you are wasting your vitality, wasting your time, wasting away your life. You're not doing the work. Doing the work is allowing yourself to sit in a space that's uncomfortable. If it wasn't uncomfortable, well, the real reason why it's uncomfortable is because there's stuff there that needs to be cleared. If it wasn't uncomfortable, you'd already have that integrated and you'd already be whole and complete and you'd be moving through living the life that you want. The life that you want is not sitting around watching motivational content. You're only doing that because you're uncomfortable and don't want to face the facts. Let's just be real and honest. Most people don't accept that, but a vast majority of LOA content in this community is designed to distract you from the facts, which I'm discussing right now, right? So that's what gazing does. If you do gazing consistently, even the basic version, you will still attain outcomes that are very potent. I will say that, but you have to be consistent with it and do it every day and keep the momentum going. Because the more you build an attunement to that level of subtlety, the more you can more easily slip into that and basically allow that intelligence that exists there to move through you and purify the not self stuff, right? And that's a part of your own awareness that's there living its own experience that you're interacting with. And as I said, when you interact with these components, they join together, and when they join together you become immortal. So that's what I'm talking about. This is why I'm teaching this stuff. Everything I've said now has a reason, because it leads back to immortality, which is the point of your existence, which is the point to integrate these components through experience, which is the point of imaginal work in the first place. Do you see the point? That's what Goddard actually was teaching in the end. In the beginning he didn't teach that stuff, really. I mean, he taught bits and pieces of it, but it was very vague. The only reason why he got popular is because he was basically teaching half-truths and sucking people into this idea that they can be anyone and have anything. Really what it's actually about is about following your correct role that is the foundation of which all this stuff builds on. But he didn't teach that as foundation. He just said, whatever you desire, which is a very vague thing. Do you see now why I'm critical of Neville Goddard? Because he never taught you a clear, defined process. You go on the Neville Goddard subreddit, you hear all these people talking about relativistic mentalism. That is not what was taught. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said that you're born as a shoe shiner in another life. He gave you a mechanic right there. He said you're not born into a life of suffering because you sinned or your parents sinned. He's saying this under the context of, he said that you're born into this life because it's necessary for you to experience. And he also said that, I'm paraphrasing this again, but I'll try and find the quote and put it on the screen in post. He said that if your lot be suffering, then suffer, knowing the glory that is to come. In other words, he's saying that you are designed to suffer, to a certain extent, in a necessary way, for a reason. He said some of those things, for example, losing a loved one as one example. That's just one example. But the point is that if you have, and he says that this is God, he said God will keep doing this. Meaning that he is manifesting these things through you to give you the components that are necessary for you to integrate to complete this work. He said that God will keep giving you these things, which is what I was saying, because that's what the air element is about. It's giving you the impulse, giving you the spontaneous, in the moment inspiration, the wish, right? He says, this you receive in the form of a wish. And that's what he means, the wish fulfilled, because it's the correct orientation, the striving that you're being moved through. But he didn't make that clear. He never made that clear. That's why nobody understands what I'm saying. They get it wrong. They get it backwards. They don't understand. There is a fixed trajectory that is the foundation of how all of this works. And that has to be the foundation that you work with if you want to make all of this relativistic, I want to manifest money in people and blah, blah. If you want to make any of that work for you, this is a requirement. It is. That's what he taught. I can quote endless amounts of examples that would either you have to accept that he's contradicting himself or that there's more to his doctrine than what you're accepting. That's a fact. It's an irrefutable objective fact. We have a fixed trajectory that we are moving through. It's necessary. It's necessary for the reasons to integrate the components that we in the current moment don't have awareness of, but looking back was necessary for us to naturally be somebody that we need to be to mediate collective experiences of some form, or our experience in a vacuum of whatever it is that we need to be doing. It's all God's will. We don't need to understand. We just need to trust and be moved by intuitive impulse when those spontaneous insights arise to make a decision that we know are correct for us to make. And you will feel the truth. You will feel the truth. People come into me and they say, oh, I don't know the difference between what is correct and what is incorrect. You feel the truth. You know what the truth is. You know it because you feel it. You know what I'm talking about. You've had those insights in the past where you look back, I had an experience, I had an opportunity, and I felt this was necessary to do. That same feeling is what I'm talking about. Sometimes it's more intense than others, but the point is that same feeling, it's on a spectrum of intensity, right? It's not always just boom. The more vitality you have access to, the more intense that feeling will be. But it's always there. And that's my point. The more you can trust that subtle, intuitive sensation that I said in my video way back, like more than 2 years ago now, trust subtle, intuitive impulse. The more you can trust that and be moved by it, the more you will be fulfilling the self, the correct role. I don't even know. Yeah, the fixed role, right? The more you will be following through the fixed role and building the foundation by which subconscious capacity can be built on top of. It's not necessary technically, but if you're not doing that process, you're shooting yourself in the foot. And some people are born in with more work done on this level than others. Some people are born in with more subconscious capacity at baseline than other people have, right? Like, there is a reason why certain people are born in with more than others. It's because in previous iterations of their existence, of their components, of their simulacrum that then overlaps the collective, their source of emanation, it had enough of an experience in the previous iteration of going through pressure and integrating components, because that's what you're building. You're building it on the subtle level. You don't have awareness and consciousness of it, but you're building on a subtle level that when you have enough capacity, you'll be able to experience and communicate with, right? That's what all of this magical stuff is about. Eventually, you'll have enough coherency where you can actually become conscious of that and allow that to basically drive you in your life correctly without needing all these contrast barriers, because you can directly interface with it. You still have to face the pressure, but you'll know and you'll be able to ask, what is it that I'm supposed to do? And you will receive communication. Parts of your consciousness will come to you in dream state and they will tell you, this is what you need to be doing. And they will give you dreams and symbolism in those dreams. This is what you need to be doing. They will communicate with you what is necessary, right? So thematic experiences translate to sensory level experiences so that we can receive the information on the thematic, the channel level of where current needs to move to mediate us to become more complete. Right? Gazing does that for you. Do you see the importance of gazing? It's very important. Imaginal work, it's the same thing. If you do imaginal work for the sake of doing imaginal work, for the sake of, training the subtle senses to go deeper into those levels of subtlety, cultivating subtle sense, right? If you do imaginal work, not for the purpose of getting something, but for the purpose of looking deeper into yourself, because that's really what you're doing. You're moving, you're slipping between the veils into the subtle levels. That's what you're really doing. And so when you do that work, the imaginal work can also have an effect where you're interacting with that subtle level. And by interacting with the subtle level, just like what you do with gazing, that can also have a purifying effect, where spontaneously you can receive sudden bursts of purifying current that can clear out not self stuff. And it can happen away from the session. It can happen away from the session, it can happen during the session, it could happen in dream state. You may wake up and hear the loud sounds and you have visions flow up on your vision board. You see these overlays, these patterns and these things, or you hear voices and they tell you things. This is what happens. Neville Goddard had these visions, he had these voices, because this was what he was doing. That's why. That you can cultivate that. That's the point. That's what all of this is for. He never told you that though, because he didn't either understand it or he was hiding it from you. But he did actually say that he was hiding certain information from his books for certain reasons, because he didn't want to have, think that people needed to know those things in order to attain outcomes, right? But that's a very ignorant statement when you really break it down. You shouldn't really be hiding any information to try and... He's basically admitting that he's leaving information out to try and lead you onto something. That's literally what he admitted. He left out information to lead you onto believing something that he wanted you to believe. And the next level about praising. What is praising for? Praising is really for the purposes of allowing us to get closer to connecting to God, basically, right? Praise of God and feeling grateful for what God provides you is you basically reaching up. Really, you're establishing more of a connection to that subtle sensation of inner truth by doing this stuff. It happens mostly unconsciously, but it kicks out more of the same stuff that, gazing and imaginal work does. It takes you into those subtle states using different elemental properties, of course. It's not focused on anything. It doesn't target a specific element, but it has affinity for certain parts. It has affinity for the spirit side. And so it's always reaching down to you, giving you impulses, but you're also going to reach up to it and meet it halfway by doing this work. And so when that communication can be made clear by doing praise work, right? Praise and gratitude does that part. There's a reason why people who have gratitude, they just have it within them. There's a reason why things in their life, generally speaking, not always, again, there's many factors, but generally speaking, they will be more flowy. Things will work for them more naturally, right? So working with praise, imaginal work, and gazing. All of these methods are working with the same principle of purifying not self stuff. I told you the methods. I literally gave you the methods, right? I gave you the methods for free. If you do this stuff, again, you're not imagining to get things. If you do imagining to get things, you're probably not going to get the benefit of doing this work. It can, if it's correct for you, but that's not always the case, because sometimes you're going to be buying into not self stuff, and you're going to be grasping at things, and you're going to think that you're purifying things because you feel good and you feel all high vibration. Ooh, I'm buzzing. No, that's not the point. The point is to allow not self stuff to be purified, because that's the foundation that builds everything else from, because that's where your baseline comes from, right? It's not necessary to manifest, but if you're not following that process, again, you're shooting yourself in the foot. So I don't want to hear about any of this stuff. I didn't have to do that. It's irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant. Different people are born on different levels. They have different baselines. There's so many variables to this that most people don't even want to factor in, because they don't like the idea of studying these factors, because it means that they have to, learn more than mentalism, which is the point. So reality synthesis is here to replace the law of assumption. Most of what Goddard said in terms of what you can do is talking about your capacity to realize. He's not saying that, when he says these things, he's not saying it from the perspective of you have it here and now. He's saying that the capacity exists for you to realize that stuff. He never said that, but if you understand the doctrine and you understand the alchemy and the metaphysics, what he's discussing, you will see that. And if you can read between the lines and read quotes that he said about trying to get people to believe things, you can clearly understand what this is really about. He said that the primary point of his thing is to get you to believe. That's why he wrote the way that he did, to get you to believe, which is still a very limiting way of seeing things. But getting you to believe is dropping off the not self stuff. All of what he taught was basically the whole point of him getting you to believe things is simply because he's getting you to tap into your truth and getting you to accept your truth, and that requires you to drop not self stuff off. Okay? That's the point. So following your correct trajectory, breaking off the not self stuff and allowing yourself to be purified so that your correct trajectory can be cleared up, and all these things that you feel like you're compelled to do that are not working for you, they can be dissolved out and you can move on. That's what we're here for. That's what this work does. That's what reality synthesis is here for, to explain to you how and why on every level. And what we have discussed here is still just the tip of the spear. There is far more depth that we can explore. And reality synthesis is taking more shape every day behind the scenes. I write thousands of pages. You can read on the notebook, by the way, which is linked in the description. There is 2,600 plus pages now. I've not updated or checked how many there are. There's probably 2,650 pages worth of notes now. That's how much work I have done over the last 2 years to explain this stuff. 2,650 pages of work. That's how much work I have done to explore manifesting. So much. So, I hope you understood what it is that I'm discussing. I hope you understand that manifestation is not all about mentalism, relativistic mind magic in a vacuum. There is a fixed trajectory that you are designed to be moved through, which again, Neville Goddard himself taught. You can't tell me he didn't. You can't tell me I'm making things up. You can't tell me I'm overcomplicating. This is what he taught. right? This is irrefutably, objectively what he taught. If you can read between the lines and see the quotes, again, the quotes would either indicate that he is contradicting himself, or he is playing games with people to try and get them to believe something that's, really just trying to get them to believe, or that what I'm saying is really what he was teaching, except he wasn't teaching it in a clear manner. He was very vague about it. He didn't reveal the mechanics. I'm doing that. I'm reverse engineering his stuff. And I'll be doing more in-depth reviews, I guess you could say, of Neville Goddard's lectures and books in the future. And you will learn the real depth of what Neville Goddard taught through a lens of reality synthesis. And you will see through exactly what it is that he taught, why he taught it, and all of the elements underlying and the mechanics underlying that nobody else in this community even begins to comprehend or has awareness of. People will claim in this community that they understand manifestation, alchemy, all of this stuff, and they'll say, oh, look at all these things I've manifested. Yeah, fixed role. Everybody has a different role to play. Everybody has a different role to play for a reason. I'm here to do my role, they're here to do their role. I'm here to correct the way that manifestation is taught using real principles, real alchemical, metaphysical principles that reality synthesis has provided understanding of and the practical basis to apply it. Okay? We have the complete package. So I hope that you guys can subscribe and stick around, and you will learn more about reality synthesis and how we can apply manifestation correctly. And we can understand more about Neville Goddard and the language that he used and how that relates to the technical understanding of, what manifesting is really about. So I hope you share this video around. I hope people can pick up on how this stuff really works, and people can begin to tap into the depth that's been hidden and lost for who knows how long. Alright? So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like, share, subscribe, all of that stuff, of course. And I'll see you next time. Stay legendary.